Go ahead and call the meeting to order, the January 18th meeting of the Los Osos Groundwater Basin Management Committee. Can we have a pledge of allegiance, please? Rob, you can lead today.
Sure. Okay, follow me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I don't know if I've given you the honor of doing that before. So.
Not yet. First time.
Well, Mr. Chairman.
He did. All right, Rob, could we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Director Garfinkel.
Here.
Director Zimmer.
Here.
Director Gibson.
Here.
And Chairperson Ohilsky.
Here. So do we have board member comments?
Yeah, I just have one comment. I got from the, I don't know if anybody saw it from State Water Board, that they're proposing to extend the drought measures, even though they had the rainfall, but they're going to go ahead and want to extend the emergency drought regulations. And they're going to have I think, a meeting on it. Do I have a date? No, it doesn't have a date here, but they're going to have a meeting on it up at their in Sacramento. But they're proposing to keep the emergency regulations going until they really know that it's affected, gotten to things. Because of course we had a lot of rain come down, but how much got into the groundwater basins is something else.
Thank you. You don't have to speak if you.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just report that county's Public Works and Planning staff had a really good meeting with the Coastal Commission staff on Friday when they were in town for their meeting. The main focus of that meeting was to bring coastal staff up to speed on the efforts of this committee. And Rob actually hung in on the phone through most of it. I think we made a lot of progress in the sense of educating the coastal staff on what we're up to and how that's going to relate to the community plan update. And in particular, I think coastal staff understands much better now the efforts on water conservation that this committee is making and how they relate or don't relate to sewer project conservation and the community plan in general. So I think that it was well more than an hour, time well spent, and I think that's going to bode very well for the community plan update that'll be coming. That's all I got.
Okay. I just have one comment, and I think that we're probably going to move these meetings back to the community center just because I think that the parking situation is kind of tenuous at best, especially during a rainfall like this. So I noticed I saw county staff parking like 2 blocks away and walking over in the rain. Is she here yet? Oh, she may not even have. She may have drowned. No, I'm just kidding. But I think we'll go ahead and relocate our meetings back to the community center unless you guys have any objection to that.
No, that sounds good.
As long as you tell us.
Yes, I'm telling you now.
Okay.
Yes, that's why Rob resent out the agenda, because it wasn't clear to at least me that we had relocated the meetings here. So, okay, so that's just a comment. Consent agenda. We have 2 items on there: the approval of the minutes and the approval of the warrants budget update and invoice register through December 2016. Anybody want to pull anything?
No, I'd like to congratulate you, though, Rob. Those minutes were extremely well done. You captured everything that happened in the meeting. Long, but it brings everything back, so good job there.
Yeah, great. I'll tell Matt a good job if he's back there. Yeah, he is. Good job, Matt.
Oh, thank you, Matt.
Thank you. Okay, so nobody wants to pull. So do we have any public comment on the consent agenda? Okay, close public comment.
Move approval.
We have a motion by by committee member Gibson.
Bruce.
Call him direct.
Second that.
I'm just getting ready for LAFCO tomorrow.
Yeah.
We have a motion by committee member Gibson. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Mr. Zimmer. All in favor?
Aye.
Yes? Unanimous?
Aye.
Okay.
Yes.
Unanimous. Okay, so with that, then we'll move to item number 6, which is the Executive Director's report. Rob?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thought it would be easier if folks had something to look at on one of the items here in my report, so I'm going to get this boot up here.
I hope that's not board with a R-E-D at the end.
Not at all. Nothing in this meeting will fall into that category. So I'll leave that up there can folks see that okay?
Oh, there we go.
Good. We're still trying to figure out this room, and then we're going to move to the other buildings, so. But that's sort of halfway through my report, and I'll provide a verbal description on some of the other items in the update here, if you just bear with me for a minute. Well, there are a number of items on our agenda today that we'll be covering in more detail. One of those items speaks to the financing, the capital financing for the Basin Management Program, so I'm going to punt on that from my Executive Director's report and defer that to the item where we talk about that, which is item 7A. And same thing with respect to the zone and benefit analysis and the potential special funding measure that's basin-wide. I think that's best covered under item 7A. I did receive, just right before the meeting, but after staff notes were published, first draft of the fall 2016 water quality and water level data. So we're going through verification on that, but we do expect that to be out in some form, published in the next, say, 30 days, and we'll be reviewing that at staff level. But in essence, from what I could see as a preliminary snapshot, seawater intrusion continues. We didn't see any significant decrease in seawater intrusion. Chlorides are up in some of the very deep zones, Zone E, and so we'll provide more on that for the fall water quality and water level data. On the National Estuary Program funded climate change analysis, which related to the Los Osos Community Plan, I don't know if Lexi's here, but we have a draft of that again just came out. We didn't expect to have it for another month, so it's a little bit earlier than what we thought it would be a few weeks ago. But I do think that can go out as a public review draft here in the next few weeks, certainly before the March meeting. And so taking a quick look at that, basically looking at different climate change scenarios from worst case to current median average rainfall. And it's going to be a very interesting study, so we'll see that hitting the website here in the coming weeks. For the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act compliance, no pending deadlines on that, though there will be another opportunity in 2018 to adjust the boundary and pursue that. And then we wanted to give folks an update on the creek discharge analysis and what the current status of that is. And I thought I'd just run through a few slides here so that you could follow along with me. So the creek discharge was an effort that last year we got the formal determination from the State Water Resource Control Board that the project, as we contemplated it, would be a groundwater recharge project. There are some projects that are creek discharges that are sort of incidental recharge, but this one I thought was pretty clear that if we were to pursue this, that it'd be a formal recharge project. And so that brings along with it some requirements to look at the amount of contaminants that are going into the groundwater aquifer, flowing through that aquifer, and ultimately getting to the wells, with the big one being carbon. That's the one constituent that even modern treatment plants don't necessarily remove it to a sufficient degree to allow you to recharge an aquifer and then pull that water back out for drinking. So came up with a next steps plan, not for action today, but just so you know why I put this in the budget for next year. So the next step, I'm calling it step 1, would be
to look in detail at advanced treatment. We now have actual water flowing through the treatment plant, so instead of theoretical numbers for what's happening with the effluent coming out of the plant, we'd have actual numbers, and we can look at specific testing and analysis based on the flows that are going to the plant right now. And then we can bring in some of the key industry vendors who often would offer some bench scale testing of their technologies to look at the removal of carbon, potential for removal of carbon. And then we can fully scope the tracer tests that will be necessary in phase 2 to determine the more precise travel time from the creek discharge to the downstream wells. So basically, we'll look at the actual water that we have coming out of the plant, do some bench scale testing, and make sure we don't have any fatal issues there with the cost. So if that all works out appropriately and we budgeted for that, we'd also like to pursue planning and implementation grants for the next phase, which is step 2. And that's to actually do the pilot testing that the state requires and the tracer study for what goes in the ground and then travels ultimately to the downstream wells. That's a much more significant effort, which some other local communities are going through this right now, who are looking at this approach. But it is spendy, and there are some grants out there for planning, not for necessarily for implementation, but for planning that would help defray some of the cost. And so in step 1, we'd be pursuing those grants, those planning grants, to help fund step 2. And then this would take you all the way through a preliminary design sufficient for CEQA. Again, we hope to get that covered under a planning grant. So those are some of the next steps, and we could talk about the detail when we get to the budget, but I wanted to give you an overview of where we sat on the issue. Been giving a regular update into the status of the Los Osos wastewater project, and so as of last week, 3,090 connections out of 4,200 have been made, so they're right around that 75% mark. And flows, at least today, are averaging about 350,000 gallons per day. So the guess as to where we end up on flow is still out there, but for my money, I'm saying maybe 450,000, 500,000 gallons per day for our current population, which is a pretty low flow compared to what some of the estimates were just a few years ago. And then effluent is discharged to the Broadison percolation site since August. And last time, the county was still in the verification process with the Division of Drinking Water to deem their water full Title 22 disinfected tertiary recycled water, and they've now met that milestone. And so that water is being formally produced from our plant, and so that's good news. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions before we go to public comment? Yeah.
Yes, I have a question. One of our former TAC gentlemen came to me and asked whether we are in any way monitoring or confirming that the Broderson site is actually draining into the aquifer. And I was wondering, do we have any test wells or anything that shows where that water is going?
Yeah, and I'd let the county respond to that, but I do know there are down gradient test wells, monitoring wells.
Okay.
So they're looking to track the mound that was supposed to develop as that water is continually percolating. So they should be able to track that and confirm that mound. But I don't know if anyone from the county wants to say more about that.
Mr. Miller, I know Public Works staff has been occupied with a whole bunch of other things. What we know from the modeling is that we know it's going into the upper aquifer, no problem. The question is, are we getting the transfer to the lower aquifer? And we can figure out what the technical basis of understanding that is. But
yeah, was there a question specific to Zone C, the upper aquifer, or Zone D, the lower?
The lower aquifer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Supervisor Gibson.
Well, I think if you can bring,
He was suggesting that we maybe put a tracer in there and follow that, but my question was, do we have even wells that would tell us that? But you say there are some wells that'll indicate
We have both Zone C and Zone D wells downgraded into that discharge.
In that
yes.
area, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we could just get an update on our next month's agenda on that, would be helpful.
Great.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I got a couple questions. The Sigma compliance, where are we at with the fringe? Are we going to get an update on that, or is that going to be part of the community plan when we understand more of that?
There we go. There's.
Oh,
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
There's,
that'd be good.
there's, I knew, should be somebody here.
Kathy crept in. Thanks, Kathy.
She was the one that was walking in the room.
Hi, my name is Kathy Martin, County San Luis Obispo staff. So for the fringe areas, we're planning to do another meeting, community hosting meeting, probably late February, early March, for Sigma compliance. And with that, the county is the only eligible entity for Sigma in the fringe area. Any other questions on that, or does that address everything?
Well, if I could just mention too, because even I've been confused on this point. So if you're within the plan area, being the area that's subject to the basin plan, we are exempted from Sigma.
Right.
And so we don't follow the same steps that are within Sigma. Our plan is intended to be Sigma compliant. Our plan has been transmitted to DWR, but it's not the same process as what the fringe areas will have to follow. So.
Correct. The fringe areas will have to follow another process compared to you guys for the adjudication.
So we'll, if I might, Mr. Chairman, we'll work together, this committee and the county as the GSA for the non-adjudicated area. We can work together and I think put together the necessary Sigma compliance, which should be a pretty thin volume given what we expect to understand about the hydrogeology of the fringe areas.
Right.
But I would like, and we've talked a little bit about this, I'd like some kind of Sigma compliant, seal of approval from DWR for the adjudicated area. I think that's going to be helpful as we work with other state agencies that it's formally recognized to the extent that it can be that we are complying not only with the spirit but in fact the letter of Sigma, given the extensive work we've already done. So. More to come on that, and maybe we could have a little update in the next meeting or two of the BMC. We have until June to declare our intention of being the
Yes, June 30th.
Yeah, so but as the only eligible entity, that's pretty straightforward bit of work. So.
Yes. Anything else?
Yeah, no, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, would this basin management committee have any responsibilities for the fringe area?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, so I would just, the June 30th deadline, and if we don't have responsibilities, that's fine, but I think that there should still be some type of alignment or try to cohesiveness between the two groups to some degree, but as far as a commitment and obligation, I don't know if that's there, but an update, I guess. I was looking at that June 30th deadline too, because we're participating in that in the St. Louis, and I know that date's coming fast, so. And then DWR is holding a workshop on adjudicated basins, and are we planning to attend that?
It's a teleconference, and I am planning to attend
Okay, good.
via
Yeah.
teleconference.
All right, that sounds good.
Are any of the other directors planning to
I
attend?
haven't heard of it yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I will, but I know somebody from Golden State will be.
For some reason, they needed 4 hours for that, which is awfully long.
Right.
I think if you could send out that information again, so we all have it, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then the only other comment is on the creek discharge. So this initial step one is the funds needed for that are in our proposed budget, and then that we'll make a determination based on the results of step one, how we move forward with step two, and look at potential grant funding. I guess this will set us up for grant funding. Is that
It's been
our
yeah.
objective?
Yeah, it's been easier to get planning grants than it has been to get the implementation grants for construction. So we'll be looking at the planning level grants to try to fund the initial work in step
Okay.
two.
You have anything, Bruce?
No, we're good.
Just a quick question. So you were talking about the groundwater monitoring. That was from, we're testing now 4 times a year, is that correct?
Twice a year.
Twice a year?
Yes.
So that we're doing fall and
Spring.
spring, okay.
Yeah.
But you're talking about the fall, so you said we should have that in the next, will we have that by the February meeting or by the March
If we
meeting?
meet in February, yes, we'd have it in February.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so with that, then we'll go to public comment on the executive director's report, excluding the items that are going to be covered under action items.
My name is Keith Weimer, homeowner in Los Osos and member of the Los Osos Sustainability Group. And I just wanted to kind of go down the items that were in the list. The water quality report, just remind me, it includes the upper aquifer testing in the shallow wells, as well as the semi-annual seawater intrusion report. Does it include both of those? And I just wanted to point out that there is kind of a substantial delay here in getting this report out. If you're going to have an effective contingency plan regarding seawater intrusion, I would think you'd want to have it, come out a little bit quicker. I wanted to know also the status of contingency planning with regard to seawater intrusion. As far as the climate change study, thank you, Mr. Garfinkel, again, and the NEP for the analysis. It does say there that this is going to be the final report, but did I hear you say, Rob, that it would be a draft report that the public would have input into? Because I, for one, would be looking for an adjusted sustainable yield and for targets for basin storage capacity. Storage capacity is the best indicator of whether the basin can withstand climate change. So I'm asking, will that study include yield projection changes and also storage level recommendations? Did I hear that you're going to spend more money attempting to change the basin boundary still? Or is the focus now going to be on the county, creating the Sigma plan for that, and then you guys coordinating it? And in that event, is there any reason to spend more money, depending on what your answer is to my first part there, on that? Creek discharge, I wanted to restate that the CR Club and the LOSG, Los Osos Sustainability Group, sees that program or that method of recharge as only worthwhile if you can establish that a significant amount of water can be distracted in downslope, downstream wells. So my question is, does the basin, or do the tests show the quantity of water that can be extracted, as well as just what kind of water quality and how long it takes to get to the downstream wells? Also, I just wanted to point out, that's a lot of money now, $200,000 by the time those studies get done. That could fund, or that amount of money could fund additional purple pipe connections, recycled water delivery, and other recycling options. And I'm just wondering if the Basin Management Committee plans on reviewing some of those other options in the future. As far as flow, I wanted to point out that the flow now is going to be about 300 acre-feet below what the Coastal Commission thought. It'll be about 400 rather than 700. It's also about 700 feet below what the project was designed for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Patrick McGibney, Sustainability Group, Los Osos. Rob, I just had a couple questions here regarding your report. One, as far as the creek discharge, on the rare occasions that we do get rain like we are now and the creek is flowing, how is that going to work, and what will happen with the recycled water that it won't be able to get discharged in the creek at that time? Also, I'd like to get some information on your communication with the Coastal Commission while they were here last week. My understanding is that the county is still going to be responsible for the $5 million for conservation, and I'd like to know if you spoke to them about that and how that is going. And if that is something that the Coastal Commission is still going to be requiring, how is that money going to be raised, since a 218 vote's probably not going to pass for this community here? So I'd like some information on that also. And also regarding the verification of compliance for people that are hooking up to the sewer, which is required. This is pretty much on a volunteer, well, not volunteer, but on a honesty basis. So people are just saying, yes, we have done this, and signing off the papers. I just had dinner at a friend's house who newly purchased her house just a couple weeks ago, and it's an older home, and it was supposed to have had all the toilets and everything redone, but actually they weren't. They have the old toilets in there that are pretty much water guzzlers. So the honest system as far as compliance goes doesn't always work, and I'd like to know maybe what you might do about that with the next 25% people that are going to be signing up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Jeff Edwards. I had a handful of comments with regard to the climate change analysis in the public review draft. I would like to note that climate change is episodic in nature, and we're not only expected to realize long periods of time with little precipitation, but then there are going to be those times we have significant amounts, more than we've ever seen before in all likelihood. So I'm wondering if this analysis takes both of those into account, periods of drought and periods of heavy rainfall. With regard to the Sigma compliance, it's clear to me that our basin is outside of any of the Sigma compliance issues that face the fringe areas. And I would like to see less of this and hear less about this. This is the county's issue, and I'd like to see the county deal with it. So while this committee may be interested in updates periodically, I think that to spend any more time or money, or including staff time, would be unproductive. With regard to the creek discharge, I'd like to note that this is a seasonal creek discharge that's proposed. That is, when the creek is dry, typically a discharge would occur in the summer months, late spring, summer months, on in early fall. So it's not intended, is my understanding, that this would be a discharge during wet weather. This is a dry weather condition. This type of groundwater recharge is widely supported across the state of California. Groundwater basin management and recharge is perhaps the most important issue facing the state. And in terms of Los Osos, the surface water recharge, or the creek discharge, could be the single most important project we implement to combat seawater intrusion in the lower basin. I am interested in the timeline for step one, and I'm also wondering if a regional board staff person has been assigned to this project yet. Lastly, with regard to project flows from the wastewater project, I did a quick calculation, and if we're 73.5% connected now and generating about 350,000 gallons a day, it works out to almost exactly 475,000 gallons per day, which equates to a little bit under 40 gallons per capita per day. So clearly we're on our way to significant conservation. My only comment would be I think we can do even better. Thanks.
Thank you.
This is Steve Best. The question had to do with the improvements on the quality of the water that's being discharged into the Broderson leach field, and if those improvements are substantial enough to make it. I'd like to see more conversation going on about the use of that water going back into the leach fields being made available for commercial, mixed-use, and residential properties for irrigation to reduce the demand on, reduce the reduction of well production requirements. That's basically my question, so thank you.
Thank you.
I want to reduce the production, thank you.
Lindy?
Good afternoon, Lindy Owen. I wanted to also get a better report on the Coastal Commission discussions about the $5 million conservation funding. And I understand that we've got a new Title 19 rebate and water credit policy going, but it's only through the private developers that it's being instituted. And I don't think we know very much about that locally. We had a discussion at land use and would like to have that made more public. If there are people that still could be they could be able to get more rebates than the ones that we have already gotten. There should be a mechanism for them to sign up. This is, again, going back to the conservation question that still has a long ways to go, I think. And I also, the recycled water is just going to Broderson. When is the rest of it going to start distributing through the community? There's a purple pipe at 10th Street and San Ynez at the county office. Will that be made available at some point? Is there any information as to whether we might see some more freedom at having home deliveries to our tanks of this water now that it's reached the requirements? If you have an update, I'd really appreciate that. And again, the issue with the private wells, brand new house, 4-bedroom house going in on Napomo, outside the prohibition zone, is able to put in a brand new private well because there isn't community water to them. I'd like to know, and is there a way for us to see how the well waters, the amounts are being monitored? Supposedly they are all being put into a monitoring program, but I'd like to know where we can get information to see those results and make sure that it's being done annually. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindy. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment. Rob, you want to respond?
That'd be great, Mr. Chair, if I could. Mr. Weimer had a question about the fall study, whether that included upper aquifer information for water level. It will, available water levels. It did take quite a while to get those compiled from the county, and so that was why there was lag. But hopefully spring will be faster. Status of the contingency plan. One of the things we want to do following the memo that Cleeth wrote is to discuss the elements of that contingency plan. And there are other elements that relate to that in the community plan that you'll hear about today. We do think that climate change report will be a draft. It's mainly technical, and so the policy questions that surround it, it'll be silent on that and leave those to this forum to discuss it, but it will give you a range of estimates there. So I think there will be a draft process, and if there's further analysis that's needed, we could talk about that. Whether additional money has been budgeted for basin boundary modifications, I haven't put that in the budget this year. The committee can talk about that, but it's not currently in the budget, but that's on a different item. Creek discharge, what happens when it rains, is on to Mr. McGivney. And it is a dry weather discharge that's being proposed, so it only would be used in the event that there was space in the basin to discharge during dry weather. We will talk a little bit more about the coastal communication when we get to item 7D, conservation, which is a standing item on your agenda to make sure we cover that. And this was one of the first stories I've heard that there are some old fixtures that are still existing out there for folks who have been connected. So I'm sure the county staff that's in the audience have taken note because we do want to make sure folks are are accomplishing their retrofits. As to the timeline for the creek discharge analysis, if that's something that's left in the budget, we think that's probably a 3 to 4 month timeline. We'll come back with an actual consultant proposal for the committee to consider before we kick that work off. But we'll see if it makes it through the budget discussion here later on in the day. And Mr. Best was asking about the recycled water as to when it may be available for expanded uses. Lindy asked about that as well. It is currently available for that. My understanding, and the county can jump in here, is that during this next summer irrigation season, the hope is that you'd have some Title 22 water to deliver at least to the community school fields. And as an aside, I've been doing some research with the help of another local CSD here on the availability of recycled water to use it for a trucked irrigation use, whether it's for a commercial property or for a residential property. There's been quite a bit of progress on that front in a couple of local communities. Goleta is one. The other is San Simeon. I actually went up there and on my own dime looked at their treatment plant, and they have a pretty extensive trucking effort there for different community uses, some of the condo common areas, some of the commercial properties. You see little recycled water signs all over the community. And they've made it through the state process of getting each one of those permitted, because the state is not easy. It's not impossible, but it's not easy to get those each site permitted, because it's not a blanket permit. You have to look at each one. They're currently not trucking it to individual single-family homes, but they're doing it in residential common areas. But they have a lot of framework laid there with the state in order to accomplish a lot of what we're trying to accomplish. So I don't know if Renee was able to make it. She did. So Renee has been a wealth of information on that, including a lot of their standard forms they produced, the signs they produced. And it seems like the community there, even though it's much smaller than us, they really enjoy the program. So we can benefit from some of that local knowledge. So thanks, Renee. And then as to private well monitoring, I do know that there is Public Works does have the ability to require monitoring on those wells. I've not yet seen any data on that, so perhaps county staff can take note of that question and get back to us, because I know the monitoring of any new wells outside the Seward zone, I think, is of significant interest here to the committee. That concludes my comments.
Okay, thank you. So with that, then we'll move to, agenda item 7. So the first one, 7A, so the update on the basin plan infrastructure projects.
Great, thank you. If you look on the screen there, you probably get tired of hearing me drone on and on, so I'll try to do a few PowerPoint slides in the future here. It's kind of nice for folks to see what we're looking at. So this is an update for our capital projects. So Program A, and this has been advanced from our last meeting. The interconnection between Golden State and Los Osos CSD is in construction after talking about it for years. And it'll be done prior to March 2017. So by our next meeting, we should be able to shove water back and forth and get that tested. So excited to finally put pipe in the ground here this year. The Los Osos CSD's 8th Street well has now been drilled. It got drilled over the holidays. We don't have all the test data back, and I'm holding my breath because the data that I've seen is pretty good. Our other shallow wells are around 70 gallons a minute. This one looks like we're going to be perhaps 30-40% above that, maybe 100 gallons a minute. And the quality was not bad, but all I've seen is nitrate so far. Upper Basin, nitrate was actually not bad. So more on that. I haven't seen Chrome 6 numbers. There's a full report that's going to be coming out for the CSD. But we do think we will want to equip and pump from that well. We think it's going to be a very good well for us, and we want to have that done this year, if at all possible. On to the Golden State Water Company blending and nitrate removal project. It started as firmly in the Program A column, but really it straddles over into Program B as well. because in order to maximize the benefit from that blending, Golden State's looking to implement nitrate removal using ion exchange. In our last meeting, they were walking through permit requirements. They've now passed that milestone. They have permits in hand. Equipment's been purchased, is sitting in storage, and they're looking to implement construction over the next 6 to 8 months, complete possibly by the end of summer, but certainly by September if no hitches occur. So all those projects are moving forward and are all 2017, so it's good to see some good physical process. Program C wells, we're still in land acquisition and environmental studies there, looking for the correct and the feasible sites for at least 2 additional expansion wells. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. Folks have been asking me, well, when are we going to get to a community-wide funding vote? And what's the status of those discussions? And I thought it'd be good to reflect a little bit on that as we talk about capital projects. So we're certainly we're not waiting around for a community-wide funding vote to advance these projects. Program C is the project it's not fully funded in terms of capital, but right now the CSD is spending dollars to pursue getting that project through a CEQA process, get it to a coastal development permit, and move it as fast as we can. And so that project is moving forward without a funding-related delay at this point. The delays are more process, finding the right site, getting it through CEQA. We're continuing to pursue Prop 1 funding. We don't have a formal response from the state yet. Last update from them, they were still reviewing our pre-application, but that's a 50% match and we're still pursuing it. And once we do get through a CEQA process and coastal permitting, that's when we'll need to make the decision whether we want to spend money on engineering design and get, say, to like a 30% or 50% design to be shovel ready on some of these Program C projects, which I think we would want to do that. And there are a number of loan programs available if we decide that for whatever reason we're not ready to go to a basin-wide Prop 218 process. Many of the agencies have been pointing out their loan programs as being something that would be available to the community to fund Program C. And then we're still interested in pursuing the basin-wide funding measure once it's fine-tuned to what we think would actually be acceptable to the community and something that people would support. We do have some dollars in the budget to advance that process in 2017. But I wanted to make it clear that we're not waiting on some of these critical projects in terms of the next steps for that community-wide funding vote. So I thought that'd be a good time to discuss that issue as well. That concludes my staff report.
Any questions? I thought it was very well done.
Yeah, I just want to say the same thing. Good job on pursuing the funding and putting us in a position where we can capitalize on those projects. So appreciate that effort. And just on one of the things about the status update of the programs B, are we should we include those in this? Could something like this be an ongoing item that we continue to look at, just so we can have an update on where we are with these programs, and would it be beneficial to include programs, B programs?
Yeah, I actually looked at that because we talked a little bit about that last time. Because your nitrate removal system, I still was categorizing as Program A, but it really straddles. And so no other progress on or plans for progress on Program B and D at this point.
Right.
But I could certainly put them on there as placeholders, and as Golden State or even the district looks to expand their nitrate removal efforts, now you're getting into that, stretching into that Program B. So
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's really why I was looking at that, is just because there's always been a conceptual of a upper aquifer well at Rosina. So, yeah, to utilize that ion exchange to its capacity. So, yeah, I just thought I'd mention that.
yeah, good.
I concur. I think having it all in front of us every time is useful. Just casual observer may not know all the other things that are going on here.
Yeah, and the update that's up there, I mean, isn't going to the same level of detail as what's in the staff report. So just for everybody's benefit, there is more detail in the staff report. Okay, so we'll take public comment on 7A.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Jeff Edwards again. I'd like to make an observation with regard to Program B.
Oh.
As most of you know, the Basin Management Plan contemplates a centralized nitrogen removal facility, and a very expensive one. If I recall, it's some $18 million. And what's happened, what's evolved is really some satellite nitrogen removal facilities. The Los Osos Community Services District already has the one at South Bay Boulevard in Napomo, and Golden State's going to have one quite soon at Rosina. And in all likelihood, the CSD will have another facility at the 8th Street well if it doesn't prove up to be high enough quality water for blending. So again, just an observation that instead of a centralized facility, it looks like we're ending up with some satellite facilities, which makes sense to me. With regard to Program C funding, I might note that we have a rather strong advocate, I believe, in this community in Monica Hunter. Monica is a Regional Water Quality Control Board member, but is very active at the state board level. And I think Monica, if this group, or Rob, reaches out to her, she might be able to provide a considerable amount of help in both grant and loan pursuits. So I wanted to mention that. As I've mentioned before, I'm not a fan of any basin-wide funding program or measure. I don't believe we need it. Program C, for example, can be fully implemented for $6.5 million between the two main water purveyors. As by way of suggestion, on your chart, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that your executive director also include the dollar amount as a column relative to any of the water projects, the CIP list, so we can get a sense of where the money is. And again, I'd reiterate that for $10 million or thereabouts, we can achieve virtually everything we're after. So I'm hopeful that we can do that between the two main water purveyors and then any grant or loan proceeds that we might be able to secure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Keith?
Keith Weimer, Los Osos Sustainability Group. Yeah, I'm going to echo what Jeff just said. It seems to me that the way these infrastructure programs are evolving, that other funding options that Rob mentioned and dispersing it between the purveyors, the obligation between the purveyors, is likely to be the best solution here. And it would get it done. I'd also echo and emphasize that Program B, especially with a very good, strong conservation program, is not likely to be needed. You know, I know the Basin Plan envisions funding or shifting the conservation program and the recycled water program to basin-wide funding. I don't see why that's necessary. The county is supposed to cover that with the Los Osos wastewater project. So, as Jeff said, you know, if there is a basin-wide funding, it can be very small. And what it might focus on is paying for conservation programs and other programs outside the prohibition zone. And it could also credit back people within the prohibition zone for any general benefits that are accruing to the basin as a whole, or people outside the prohibition zone from the conservation program or the recycled water program. So it could be a very limited tool, and it could also be, you know, crediting people back within the prohibition zone for what they're paying for. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment and bring it, bring it back. Rob, did you want to respond to those quick questions?
I saw those as more comments.
Yeah, I did.
Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Good comments.
No, and I appreciate I think that the one comment that was about adding the dollar amount, I think is a helpful thing to add a column for that, so. Okay, nothing else? All right, moving along, we'll go to 7B, which is adoption of our annual budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Up there on your screen, you have, it's always nice to have a simple budget, isn't it? It's a lot faster.
Not 40, 50 pages. right?
Exactly. If it was that, I don't think I'd be sitting in this chair right now. But so this is the proposed budget for discussion. I've consolidated just a few items to get it on one slide, but essentially administrative and staff work, the preparation of our staff reports and all the admin work that goes in. Same budget as last year. We were able to hit that number, come a little under this year. Meeting expenses, this would cover both the video services and if we move back to South Bay, I think that this would be close to sufficient, certainly within our allowable contingencies. Semi-annual monitoring and the annual report, similar numbers as last year. We rolled over another $12,000 for grant assistance. That was helpful last year. We didn't spend it all, but we'd like to have that available to bring in some consultant help to pursue select grants. 218 process, including legal counsel. Depending on where we go as a committee with the community-wide funding vote, we could need all or a portion of this. Last year, we didn't spend near our budget because we only had the initial look, and we really concluded at that time that the administrative-related funding vote would probably not achieve the required support, so we pulled back. But I am rolling that forward this year in case we want to do either a two-thirds style community facilities district or even a special benefit district. It's hard to know where we would go, but there's some dollars in there to cover that. Creek recharge studies from a previous discussion, we included $25,000 for that if the committee so chooses. Conservation programs, this wouldn't be intended to replace what we talked about at previous meetings in funding our rebate programs and so forth. This is mainly looking at the program development, public information, so we have money for mailers, that sort of thing, as a basin management committee. So not to further burden the purveyors with something that they may already budget for in their own process. So the total with a standard 10% contingency is $264, and you can compare that to last year where we budgeted $314 and spent a little less than half of that because we didn't move forward on the special tax. So any questions or comments?
Any questions? Just a quick comment here on the table that you have there. And it's clear to me because I'm on the CSD, but your header talks about projected total in the LOCSD. So it just needs to be clarified that that's the total for not only us, but for Golden State. So,
Right.
I mean, it's just a typographic thing.
Thank you.
It's just the fiscal year 16.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, instead of being a CSD, it's the fiscal year.
They
Right.
wanted to take over.
County has the same fiscal year, yes.
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 So I just want to make it clear that that wasn't just the CSD, it was all four parties.
We will note that.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll go to public comment on the budget. Yep, Keith?
Well, I came in a little late for the past budget, but I just wanted to mention that, the past budget included almost $100,000 in studies, and this one includes, let's see, about $175,000 in studies, including the 218 process study, which I think might not be needed. So you can see a good opportunity for saving quite a bit of money there. I would suggest that you make that you look at that funding need there. I just wanted to point out, with that much money going to studies and almost no money at this point going to actual programs that are reversing seawater intrusion, most of that being handled by individual purveyors. I would like to emphasize that and encourage you to fully fund and get the conservation program fully implemented in the next year so the public can see that this group is having some very tangible benefit for the basin and for the public. That's an opportunity to advertise the need of this particular group and what it can do for people, and it just is an opportunity that shouldn't be wasted. Of course, it depends upon the county being good on their commitment with the $5 million to fund the program, and I encourage you to encourage the county to do that. I just wanted to add here, should the funding include additional monitoring well funding, whether or not it be developing, private well monitoring or, adding new monitoring wells, because the annual report did suggest quite a few more monitoring wells. I know that Supervisor Gibson back a ways, several months ago, said that the county would fund another well along the estuary, and I'm just wondering what the status of that is. I would recommend and hope that you would also include some funding to review other recycled water options. That shouldn't be too big of an expense, and as we heard, there seems to be some other options for recycled water use that would dovetail with some of the with the program that's being developed with the help of Cambria CSD. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Yes, Steve?
This is Steve Best. The comment just came up about letting the community know and have more input about what's happening. And I brought it up at one of the CSD meetings. There is a media option for this community. If the public media called Nextdoor, it's a media site relatively similar to Facebook, but it addresses primarily just the issues within this town. And I find that with a lot of things, with the CSD, with LOCAC, and also with this basic management meeting, there's a lot of people within the community that want to know what's going on, need to know what's going on, and have a hard time keeping abreast of what's happening, and would like to have some knowledge. And Nextdoor provides a public agency connection with the community that addresses some of these issues, and I think the Basin Management Committee would be well served to look into how to tap into that media and be able to, it would give the committee a lot more potential to be able to communicate with the community, as well as getting feedback from the community, and we get more participation within the when we do have meetings, people would be more aware of what's going on. They'd have more time to prepare comments and insights and their particular knowledge and questions and so forth. So I think you should look into that and prepare to participate in that public agency application with Nextdoor. Thank you.
Thank you. Lindy?
Lindy Owen, I just had a question about whether the Golden State and the CSD conservation efforts that are going on individually in each water company, is the $10,000 in addition coming from the Basin Management Committee budget? So we're talking about the individual water purveyors are funding their own conservation to a certain level, as well as this extra $10,000 is in conjunction. Maybe you could explain that better. I'm not sure what.
Thank you, Lindy. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment. And yeah, Rob, if you could just answer that one question, I think it should be relatively straightforward.
Yeah, it is contemplated to be over and above, primarily focused on public information, as we have a program that came out, like the postcard we sent out to do a community-wide mailer is, $1,000 or whatever it is. So as this committee decides to communicate, this will be a fund source to do that, but it wouldn't necessarily be used for rebates and that sort of thing, since those would be the individual purveyors. I know Golden State has a whole list of rebates on their website that you can get. So mainly for public info, or whatever this committee would jointly allocate. And there was a question also on a new monitoring well, and we've applied for that as part of our pre-application for Prop 1, because those are some of the bigger dollars. But that's something that we could certainly talk about at some point, is how to either partner with the county in their monitoring well installation process county-wide, or how to get that monitoring well in. We've been wanting that Cuesta by the Sea monitoring well for a decade now, so I'd like to see that move forward.
Thank you. Any other comment, Bruce?
Yeah, if I might, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Following up on that I think that monitoring well is an important part of our adaptive management, and it's a committee, a basin management committee expense, not particularly a county expense. I'm not sure that it's in the programs A through D because it's not directly related to water supply issues, but I think we should need to keep it on the table and figure out how to mobilize the resources to do it. Looking over the sheet here, it's great to have a one-page budget. It looks good to me. Appreciate your looking into each of these categories, and happy to offer a motion to approve it. Should note for the record that this is the committee adopting its budget. The actual appropriation of these monies is going to require the appropriate action in each of the four partners. So we'll follow up on that. But my colleagues are all right with it. I'll move approval.
Is there?
I'll second that.
Yeah, there's a motion and a second. Any other comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, passed unanimously. Okay, Rob, we'll get to the update on the Los Osos Community Plan. Oh, I was going to make one additional comment on Steve Best's comment. Pardon me. I think that's a good comment, but I think one thing that we can do as far as the Basin Management Committee is piggyback on Golden State, the CSD, and the county as far as social media goes, because I think that is a good informational tool for a lot of people. So I just wanted to bring that up, that I think anything we can do, as far as the CSD goes, we're looking at getting an intern involved as far as working with our social media. So that could be something that I think this committee piggybacks on all the efforts that are currently going on. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
I think that's very important, and the idea of an intern, they do tend to be more savvy at such things. It's not my strength personally, so if we had...
The older you get, the less it is our strength. I know how that goes. Okay, so anyways, we'll move on to item 7C.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've had this item in front of the committee in a couple of different forms over time, and we thought it would be most helpful today, since we're seeking to provide input to the Planning Commission, the County Planning Commission, by April. And so I know this is it can be a controversial issue. Staff's not come forward with any firm recommendations, but we have been able to listen to what the committee members have said and are trying to look at this matrix of options and narrow it down to some key bullets that seem to reflect what the committee had provided in terms of input. And so I tried a little bit of a different approach in this discussion to narrow down what I thought I had heard in a couple of different bullets here to see if we can't come to some level of closure. And what I thought is that if we can get some firm input from committee members and look to come back in our February or March meeting for an action, which would be a letter to endorse a letter to the county, making really just recommendations is what they would be. The county would ultimately be the decision on this, and then all the way up to the Coastal Commission as the final decision. As Supervisor Gibson mentioned, there was a discussion last week with commission staff just to let them know that we were talking about this as an important issue. and that further feedback was forthcoming. But I thought I'd walk you through what I thought I heard in previous meetings as, I'm not going to call it consensus, I'll call it feedback. So one that was pretty clear is that the use of the nitrate metric didn't really apply to development. So I think we can pretty safely say that that's a function of time and performance in the Los Osos wastewater project. So that's not going to factor into our recommendations to county and the coastal commission. Development that would rely on the lower aquifer, I think at least the majority of the feedback that I thought I heard was that you'd want to see the physical metrics that relate to the lower aquifer met in some fashion in order for additional development that relies on that resource to move forward. And I've listed the chloride and the water level metric as being the two. Now, how long those would need to be met for and to what degree is subject to some fine-tuning, but I think I heard that development that relies upon that would need to come after those metrics are hit. There's quite a bit of discussion on the upper aquifer, and what I thought I heard was that a phased plan may be possible for the development of new upper aquifer resources, whether those are upper aquifer wells and the attendant nitrate removal facilities, or what form that takes. That some sort of a phased plan may be supportable by the committee, as long as you had protective metrics that were added, for instance, to make sure that the upper aquifer didn't have water levels that got low enough to induce seawater intrusion, which is not the case currently. And perhaps some storage metric to go along with that, and staff could develop that if this is something that we've heard correctly from the committee. Last time you talked a little bit about Title 19, and it came up in public comment. The county has added some additional options there for Title 19, and there may be other options consistent with your previous amendment to the conservation plan that could be discussed, but that you would need further review on that. I know one of your homework assignments was for you all to go off and read Title 19 last time. Don't know if you did that. Reduced average rainfall is an issue that came up and was really the genesis of the study that the estuary program ended up funding, which obviously we'll have the study in front of us at the next meeting, but that is an issue of interest relative to the community plan. And I know Director Garfinkel had some further thoughts and provided a figure that I thought at the conclusion of my comments might be a good time for you to, if you're still up for talking about that.
Okay.
I've got it here on the laptop.
Okay.
So you can get ready for that mentally. And then some sort of limitation on growth rate. I had heard that would be an important way to make sure that you didn't reach too far if you were going to rely on the upper aquifer. So that's what staff thought that they heard. Obviously, there's going to be significant public feedback, and we're open to go wherever the committee wants to go, but wanted to have something for you to react to as part of this discussion.
Thank you. Bill, do you want to do?
Let me get Bill's slide up.
Well, you're doing that. I think one thing that I don't want to say I'm disappointed with, but that I would have liked to have had as background information is that last round of monitoring, because I think that's important. I know you said in your initial review that it didn't show, but I'd really like to see the detailed monitoring from a personal perspective before I come up with objective criteria. So,
Right. Not in the absence of that monitoring, we thought the principle for any development that relies upon the lower aquifer would continue to be meet the metrics, but we'll certainly have that for your next meeting.
all right, Bill.
Well, it's washed out a little bit, isn't it? It's a little hard to see.
Okay, well,
We've
didn't
all
ever
seen
come
it,
up
so
with-
you don't have to go into a great
Okay.
amount of detail.
Yeah.
It was an awesome presentation.
But let me explain it. This is, I call it a normalized history. In order to get everything on a single graph so that we can see the timelines, I based it all on 100%. In other words, during the period of 1970 to 2015, the high point was 100% of any of them, of either the rainfall or of our pumping or the chloride metric that we measure. So it's all a percentage of what's happening. And you can see from the chart as you put down those three things and then watch what happened to the chloride, it's a picture quickly emerges that, first of all, from 1970 to 1980, we had a very large increase in our population in Los Osos. And so during that period, the pumping was still, we're increasing pumping all along. In fact, peaked pumping in about 19, let's see, I guess we peaked it in 1987 or something, or 88, was peak amount of pumping from the aquifer. And meanwhile, the rainfall was falling way down. We had another drought in that period, at least Los Osos, San Luis Obispo County did, including Los Osos. We had a real big drop in the rainfall, and that's first dip that you see in the rainfall, which was occurring at the same time we were increasing pumping. And so when you look at the chlorides, they lasted pretty good in the beginning, but finally the combination of low rain and high pumping began to take its effect, and slowly the seawater intrusion started coming in, and therefore, by 1988-89, when we realized that, hey, we've got to start doing something about our pumping, we reduced the pumping, but unfortunately the rainfall also reduced at the same time, so the basin really was not able to recover chlorides, and they continue to rise until, well, they're still rising. That's our last reading. So my question was, when we look at that, what could we do? Is this an irreversible thing as far as the chloride metric, or if the pumping stays down and if the rainfall comes up a little bit? By the way, I looked at some forecasts that UC Davis is doing, and they do have some good news that there's a good potential of having higher rainfalls coming to us in the next 5 to 6 years. So that might help, but the question I have, and that's why we need the information from Cleeth as to what is the actual basin capable of doing. Are we going to be able to recover that, or will the chloride stay at that level regardless of what we do in the near term being 10 years?
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions before we go to public comment? I think, as Rob said, I think you've done a good job of, I don't want to say how to put this, but putting it in the matrix and addressing the issues that have come up. So let's go to public comment then on item 7C. Yes, Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Jeff Edwards. I'd like to note that the Planning Commission for the community plan is likely going to be put off some number of months. Ms. Brown is here from the Planning Department and may be able to confirm that really summer is probably when the community plan is actually going to be going to the Planning Commission. So there's a little bit more time. On some of the points, I'd like to note that with regard to Title 19, this community needs a next generation program. And this requires an amendment to Title 19, which I'll go into greater detail during the next agenda item. With regard to the analysis that was presented by Mr. Garfinkel, I think that one of the limitations of that analysis is that given we're in a world of climate change, much of the historical data is not going to be all that revealing. It's really from now over the next 10, 20, 30, 40, or 50 years And to be able to look at that, again, deep droughts, big rainfall. So it may end up that our average rainfall actually is not reduced, but increases. We don't know yet. We have to see how climate change plays out. With regard to the community plan, I think one of the most important considerations in any discussion of growth needs to be framed by Title 26. That's our growth management ordinance. And as some of you may know, our county growth rate is 2.3%. Many communities, or a handful of communities, have community-centric growth rates. And I think that's one of the things we need to discuss almost immediately for this group, is what is the concept for a future growth rate? And I would submit to your committee that 0.5% could be a very viable growth rate for this community. That equates to about 25 homes per year. I think that's something we could live with here. So I would encourage you to look into the growth rate and analyze that in the context of Title 26. Also, with regard to the community plan, there is some stale information, some stale data in the plan that was borrowed from the basin management plan. Well, we don't need to generate 4,000 acre-feet of water to balance this basin and future growth at the same time. So I think it's important that some of the stale data in the community plan be reviewed and corrected. And then, again, very important is that we need to have real build-out projections relative to water demand. And I've suggested on numerous occasions that full build-out of this community over 30 or 40 or 50 years can be accomplished with less than 200 acre-feet of additional water supplies. So I think that's both the build-out numbers need to be correlated, as well as a growth rate needs to be analyzed. And I think those would be instrumental in moving the basin, or the community plan forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Keith?
Keith Weimer, Sustainability Group. And you knew I couldn't agree with Jeff on everything. Yes, in fact, I have about the opposite approach here. What's wrong?
That's me.
Okay, thanks. And that is that, to base any projections on what growth is going to be on the possibility of there being enough water or more water generated by some of these infrastructure plans is basically irresponsible. We've gone for 30 years with a severe overdraft problem that's caused a severe seawater intrusion problem, and we are definitely not sure if there's enough water for the current population until seawater intrusion stops and reverses, and there's enough storage capacity above sea level in each of the aquifers to ensure a buffer against climate change and any other uncertainties in the future. That's just the basic fact of the matter. We don't know if there's enough water for the existing population. So to say you're going to project or allow a certain amount of water based on implementation of Program B, let's say, is, like I said, again, it's not responsible. It's not conclusive evidence. It's wishful thinking is what it is. And I would also caution again against putting your eggs in the basket of, Title 19, because Title 19 allows building. It allows building by temporarily having the people that want to develop help people conserve. So what does that do? For a period of time, people, a little bit more water is saved than what those people may add, but it replaces a good conservation program that helps people in the existing population reduce water use as much as possible. The first and immediate goal of the basin plan is to help the existing and to ensure the existing population has an ample water supply. To do that, you implement the best conservation program you have, implement the best recycled water program you have, you get a clear indication from actual measurements, not from modeling projections, that seawater intrusion is reversed and there is an ample storage capacity above sea level to provide a buffer for the future. And then you say, all right, we can have more building. But it's irresponsible to create a matrix that allows building based on projections and wishful thinking. Thank you.
Thank you. See, that's what happened. They know one through.
Lindy, and I would agree completely. That's that term, paper water. It's water that does not exist except in a scientist's mind that, with the best luck, they might be enough. So I urge caution too. Just a little background. In 1983, the county, when property owners here knew that there was going to be a sewer moratorium in 1989 or 88, I think, 1,140 homes were constructed. It was like 5 years of massive growth. So we've made our mistakes in the past. We knew in the 1970s that we had saltwater intrusion. So the caution was ignored, and it put us into a worse position to allow 1,140 homes get thrown into the mix. I estimate they took 25 to maybe 40% more of the water out of our basin. So we only made things worse. Again, I don't think you should be basing anything. The matrix should be how much of a water supply exists in both the lower aquifer and the upper aquifer. At the rate, I know that's a difficult one to get an idea for, but how many years of water do we have at the current rate of use that we have? Even with, if we cut back or put a couple more houses, I think we need to know, is it 100 years? Is it 20 years? Those are things that if we're going to be doing a community plan update about housing, we really need to look at. And I'll just throw in my 2 cents about affordability. I think we need to actually, when we start looking at houses, it's only the wealthy home builders that are going to be able to do it here. We need to put something in to also allow smaller units for workforce housing and seniors and lower income people. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, again, we're going to have to terminate this meeting at 20 after 3, so if you guys want to speak, it'd be helpful if you get ready to speak.
Steve Best. I've been seeing a lot of numbers based on the sewer, our water consumption, how much water we're pumping out of the ground, putting it back in, and so forth. But what I'm not seeing here is part of the bigger picture is what's outside the prohibition zone. How much water is being consumed, from the areas that are not part of the water districts. And also going back into the ground as far as part of the sewer system, and how that affects development. If the development's within the zone or with developments outside the zone, and also how are things being equalized of the burden of this whole situation with what the people within that have to put in the sewers, their cost, and how that's being balanced with the people that are outside that zone, and what their contribution to the solution to our water problems are.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment. I did have a question for Carrie. I know you're here. Are you still here? Yes. Just Jeff raised the question that the update was going to be delayed. What's your schedule for that?
Yeah, we probably won't be going to the Planning Commission in April, probably more like the summer of 2017.
Okay, thank you.
But we do.
I know you want to get comments sooner than later. I understand that. Given that, I would really like to see us say that this is good, but then defer things until we actually get that water monitoring report next month.
So if I might, Mr. Chair, having been through a couple of LCP updates on this, I think it's important to understand that what the role of this committee is versus the role of the Planning Department, the Planning Commission, and ultimately the Board of Supervisors and the Coastal Commission in doing this. This is an LCP update. It's not an exploration of Title 19. It's not an exploration of the Growth Management Ordinance, which sets growth rates in various places of the county. Both of those are going to have a role in dealing with the situation within Los Osos at the appropriate time. But what the LCP is a forward-looking document talking about the future development of the community of Los Osos, which in and of itself presumes a certain amount of further growth, further development. And that's going to depend on the resources, particularly the coastal resources, namely the water supply in this case that's available. So I would suggest that this committee keep it fairly simple in our comments to the Planning Department. It is appropriately their Planning Department, Planning Commission, Board of Supervisors, Coastal Commission is the proper space in which the policy decisions of how much more growth and where and of what nature occurs. What I think we need to do is make a simple statement to the Planning Department to be passed on into the hearing process that this committee has a plan in place to create a sustainable long-term water supply, and that it's SGMA compliant. It is equivalently SGMA compliant, which is going to mean something, I think, to the Coastal Commission. That it's based on accepted climate change models, and whatever that is, we have time to adjust what we are doing based on the studies underway. I think that's entirely appropriate, but again, that's something particularly the Commission is going to hear. But I think we need to assure the Planning Commission that our projections of water supply available are based on accepted climate change models. It's based on adaptive management, which is another important concept that the Planning Commission is going to be interested in speaking about. And as to the potential for future growth, I think that's also incorporated within our plans A, B, C, and D. We have shown a plan to put the basin in balance at existing development and a plan to put the basin in balance at a point of expected build-out. It becomes then a level of detail to talk about how we do that. Specifically, we're going to monitor, and I don't think that any given 6-month monitoring result is really germane to the Planning Commission's studies, but the fact that we are monitoring that and we will have a set of metrics and we need to communicate that. Similarly, that we see an opportunity for supplying water to new growth by denitrifying the upper aquifer. And in the discussions with the Coastal Commission, they fully understood, and actually I think we're interested in the fact that denitrifying upper aquifer water has the potential for increasing the overall water supply, but also cleaning up a pollution problem a little faster than it would otherwise do. So, to me, in terms of our comment to the Planning Commission, let's just lay out those basics and offer to present a study session at the first Planning Commission meeting that would go into the details to make sure the commissioners have the necessary basis. And I don't think we need to get at the level of this matrix. I think we just need to educate, as we were starting to do with the Coastal Commission staff. Let's back up, and planning sat in that same meeting, and I hope that was helpful to your colleagues, Carrie, in terms of understanding what the mission of this committee is. And I think that if we can communicate what we do to the to the Planning Commission, they will naturally understand how to fold it into their policy discussions. And we go back to implementing as we're supposed to do. So that would be my thought, and with a little extra time, maybe we could I would suggest we frame a response, a fairly simple X page, N pages, where N is probably less than 5, explaining those things. And let's give it to Carrie and make ourselves available to discuss the details when they're ready.
Okay, thank you. Do we have other comments on that?
Yeah, I support a lot of what you're saying there and agree with it. I think, right now we can't really make a comment. I think we do need the information before us. I think that, we do need to understand our role, what this committee's role is, and leave the county in their purview to work through what's in their discretion. I think that, given the fact that we have more time now, that really gives us a better opportunity to vet this. So I guess the direction would be to really have staff go back and look at the items here that we have and come back with those. And once again, really keep it in line with what our basin plan objectives are. And, one of the things that I look at too is, will this impact us as far as any financial commitments or anything like that? We also want to give the county the ability to revise, any of these standards that we make today. We're still in such an infinite stage of looking at the data that we're going to get back and review. We really, some of the implementation that we put forward, we really aren't seeing the effects of that today. So, I think having a little bit more broad response and recommendations and trying to really assist the county in their effort would probably be my recommendation to staff.
Bill, are you on board with that approach?
I am, yes.
Okay. So I think maybe, Rob, to come back to us next month or next meeting, after, I think you can consult with both Bruce and with Carrie and then provide the information that would be, I think, big picture type information that would give them an understanding of what our role is and how we see this thing. And like Bruce said, we're doing X, Y, and Z. So why don't you, if that's okay with everybody, we'll just have him bring that back next meeting.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I thought that the letter that you're referencing, I could definitely see its content in my mind. So
Okay.
I think we can bring that back.
All right, so that'll bring us up to the last item on our agenda, the action item 7D, update on the water conservation program.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At your last meeting, we had a substantive discussion on the Conservation Implementation Plan addendum, and the committee ended up endorsing that addendum with certain changes that were discussed at the meeting. That's now been completed, published to the website, provided to the county. I think Coastal has a copy also. And there was a few minor typographic clarifications that the county has suggested on two of the rebate programs, specifically harmonizing the text with the table. They're minor and clerical in nature, and we're making those updates. But at this point, we have some progress at the county level in thinking about how these rebates would actually be implemented when those are funded, when the funding is available. And there's a draft circulating which we can bring back once the county feels like it's been sufficiently reviewed internally of their standard rebate form adapted to the outdoor measures that we've come up with. And so that's in draft form at county staff level. We'll be bringing that back. And also they're looking at the resource allocation necessary to go out and do an inspection to make sure that if we do offer a rebate, there's a pre and post inspection to confirm that the applicant actually implements an irrigation supply as opposed to just closing up their tank. And so those items are in the works, and I do believe they'll be available for discussion at your next meeting. As far as funding for the program itself, at this point, our funding is limited to that which has been offered by the National Estuary Program. Less than $10,000, a cap of about $9,000, which we, if ready, would do on maybe some sort of a lottery basis. There's a lot of interest for folks who have already cleaned and closed their tanks and now want to do repurposing. A lot of interest in securing rebates, so it's likely that we'd have a lot of takers for those dollars, which we certainly appreciate from the NEP. But we hope to have the county's forms and process in place to help us administer it, including the cost at the next meeting, so we'd at least be able to expend those Morro Bay NEP dollars. And what our understanding of the funding of the balance is that the The DWR dollars, counties indicated, would be quite a challenge to get those remaining DWR dollars into this program. Not impossible, but challenging and possibly time-consuming. And I know the county's having discussions with the Coastal Commission about the funding constraints and issues, and I'll let county staff speak to that. But that's staff's understanding of the current status, and we're ready to move it forward as funding becomes available.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Okay, public comment, but please try to keep it brief. Again, Supervisor Gibson does have to leave, so.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jeff Edwards. Some of you may have seen the New Times article from last Thursday's paper. The article was entitled, Los Osos to get water conservation rebates, but who will fund it? Question. I think this not only creates confusion about conservation in this community, but it also underscores the fact that really very little is being done for conservation right now in this community. I was hopeful that this item was going to be an analysis of the existing Title 19 program, and it hasn't played out that way. So for that, I would like to offer the following, and that is the Title 19 program is a voluntary program that allows for indoor plumbing retrofits, primarily toilets and shower heads. As the staff report indicates, the program has been expanded somewhat administratively to allow for energy-efficient washing machines and water-efficient washing machines to be used. This is kind of we're scabbing on to what is a very good program. What is the reluctance on the part of this committee to look at the entirety of Title 19 and perhaps consider recommendations about amending it? Let's create a next-generation program. The staff report suggests that with the washer replacement, there's substantial opportunities for additional water conservation. Well, substantial is the relative term. In the tens of maybe 10, 20, 30 acre-feet of water, perhaps. But the conservation availability out there is over 200 acre-feet. If we amend Title 19, amendments could include, where now it serves the area just outside the prohibition zone, an amendment to Title 19 could include the entire water basin. It could include outdoor as well as indoor. Could expand plumbing fixture or equipment to include hot water recirculation pumps. There's a lot that can be done, but you know, the idea that the NEP is going to kick in $5,000 to $9,000, we're talking about, to really do this right, we're talking about $2 million to properly retrofit indoor and outdoor the rest of the community, the entire community. $2 million. $5,000 is not going to cut it. And there's no other money. So when it comes to funding, that's the operable question. Where's the money going to come from? There is none. Allow the private sector to do it. It's a no-brainer. Let's not reinvent the wheel. It's a program that exists today, and rebates, in contrast to the private sector-driven program, homeowners, they don't have to have any knowledge. They don't have to think about it. They make an agreement with one individual that retrofits their home with a licensed plumber. There's no upfront cost. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item? Yes, again, we're running out of time here, so if you've already said something, you could just refer back to that, please.
Keith Weimer, I wanted to thank the Basin Management Committee again for the updated Water Conservation Implementation Plan for the Los Osos Wastewater Project. It significantly improves upon the first one, helps basin residents to reduce their potable water use as much as possible in order to maximize basin sustainability by offsetting seawater intrusion as much as possible. The Los Osos Sustainability Group believes it complies with the letter and intent of the Los Osos Wastewater Project Coastal Development Permit, and we encourage the county to fund it with existing Los Osos Wastewater Project funds. From the $5 million the CDP required the county to commit, $3.5 million of the commitment remains. I noticed in the New Times article last week that John Waddell is saying now that the Department of Water Resources grant has been exhausted. Does that mean the 400,000 the Basin Management Committee expected to be there and was going to use for a startup for this program is not there? So I'm asking Supervisor Gibson and Mr. Miller, update us on the status of Los Osos wastewater project funds that are going to go to this program. I wanted to share that I recently hooked up to the sewer, and working with Gellerman Construction, I was able to time it so that all I needed to do was let the rain fill it from the last storm. He put in the chlorine, and I didn't have to use any water from the tap. I also put a reverse P-trap on the outlet, so I got another 20% in my tank. I think there's about 1,200 gallons in there right now. It's 5.5 feet deep with water. With the other tanks I have in the backyard, the gray water reuse system I installed, I'm using zero potable water, zero water from the basin for all the outdoor uses, and I have a thriving garden and landscape. So that's the goal the sustainability group suggests, and with this program in place, that's what everybody could achieve, having a major benefit for this basin. Conservation is the centerpiece of the basin plan and the most effective, surest, and fastest way to stop and reverse seawater intrusion in the basin. I encourage you and the public to urge the county to fully fund it now. I wanted to mention one point, and that is that when I talked to the pumper who came by my house, he said quite a few people that he's dealing with, 25 to 40%, are having their tanks filled with water, clean and close. But almost nobody. I was the first one of all the people that he's pumped who's actually hooked up to the downspouts. So
Okay, thank you, Keith. Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing no other public comment, we'll bring it back to the committee.
This was just an informational update. County's working on updating this. We've explained that funds that are in the wastewater project budget right now are very difficult to the point of not being really feasible to move over to fund this updated conservation plan. County is working on finding another source to get it going. We'll do that. I'll just close by indicating that the meeting with the Coastal Commission, we did explain to them, and they understood that water conservation is really a basin-wide issue and not just a prohibition zone issue. And they understand that the county will be coming forward at some point, at the appropriate time, which is yet to be determined, with a permit amendment to relieve the wastewater project itself of the conservation requirements and show that it's being replaced by a basin-wide effort that the Coastal Commission can support. And they understand the rationale of that. We're working through the details to find how we get that in place. So we're making some progress, and we'll look forward to getting this going. Appreciate the staff's work on that. So.
Do you have anything else?
Nothing further.
Any other comments on this? Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate the work too, because we've been working on this. It seems like, we keep coming back to each individual agency, and I think we're solidifying that right now what we have to work with today is our each individual agency's effort. So I think it would be beneficial if we looked at those a little closer, and I know, well, maybe some of the agencies might have some flexibility to implement some plans that they're currently not participating in lieu of other. So I think, one of the things we talked about last meeting is having more community involvement. I think tying these plans, individual agency plans together would be helpful, and really reviewing those to understand what do we have, how do we have items in the memorandum today, and looking at those and look at the feasibility of what we're capable of implementing, and having that in front of the public today, because really I think that outreach effort has to come. I know that in past history sometimes we've had rebate programs and such in place, but people may not have known about them. They didn't take advantage of them. I think really getting a solid list of what's available today and start that outreach effort would be important. And I think developing some participation, the sustainability group put together some great comments. We've heard great comments from other of members of the public, and that if we started a committee of some sort that could relieve the staff time of looking at that and have more participation from the community, I think would go a long way. And one of the things I'd like to see happen is that, when we start out, if we choose to start out with a committee, is that we have a member from each agency a part of that committee just to help guide that in the right direction. And then we look at developing a list of potential candidates that want to volunteer their time to do this. And how we go about that, I don't know. Maybe it's something that we put on our website and have the community submit a letter of interest or something of that nature. Moving forward, how do we implement this committee? I mean, I guess right now it'd be, do we have a buy-in to form a committee at this point? I think we're there, kind of. We have to understand. It seems like we're going to start going in a circle if we don't start moving down a path that we have and utilizing the resources we have available today. And I think getting a committee together, it might be the time to do that. And next meeting, coming back with.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's something, Rob, you and I can talk about and bring that back at the next meeting. I think that we can figure out some potential structures and then bring it back next meeting.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so I'll work on with Rob on that.
Yeah, and that would be great. And if we had a mechanism for the community members to sign up or volunteer, and then we can evaluate how that.
Yeah, we'll figure out something. We'll bring it back next
Sounds good.
meeting.
Thank you.
Anything, Bill?
No.
Again, the only closing comment I had was, I think that the comments we got last time and we incorporated, especially from the sustainability group, as far as some of the things were really, really helpful. So I appreciate the public input on this, because I do think it's a better program than it was now. Now we just got to figure out how to make it happen.
Right.
Okay, thank you. So with that, then, we'll go to public comment on items appearing, or probably not appearing on the agenda. Please. Again, Supervisor Gibson has to leave.
Mr. Chairman and colleagues, please accept my apologies. I need to be down a wet road a distance for my next meeting, and my alternate is not here. So I will look forward to when we convene. Thanks.
Thank you.
Lindy Owen, just a short public comment again. Until we know how much water is being used outside of the prohibition zone on private wells, we will never know. I visualize somebody could put up solar panels. It wouldn't cost them a penny to pump the water. They can use all the water they want. If they want to raise grapes, if they want to start doing grass-fed beef, if they want to run swimming pools, etc. We have very little control over the private wells. And I don't know why that, I do know why the county does not want to get involved with controlling. And it's not about whether people can use that water, it's about how much they use. That's the data. I don't care. They can legally do whatever they want, but if I know that they're using a quarter of the basin, just an example, Oprah Winfrey in Montecito is one of 3 property owners that use more water between the 3 of them than the rest of their community. So their regional board is trying to figure out a way to get in and tighten down, shut them off. They're just abusive. And I don't say that people outside the prohibition zone are necessarily abusive, but the opportunity is way too questionable, and I do know 2 people that abuse. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay. Seeing none, then we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thank you, Rob.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Bruce could have stayed.